Thank you so much, Hilary, for joining us. Elon Musk is targeting USAID. Now, this is a government department with $40 billion worth of spending in 2023. Do you think that this is right, that this department should be cut or shut down?
Well, I think, Stephen, that what Marco Rubio has said, house cleaning is a very good idea. And I think when people know that you're going to be cleaning house, they tend to tidy up. And that might be very helpful because, yes, from the reports that I have read and seen and heard, Stephen, a lot of this funding was going to not only terrorist organizations such as Hamas in Gaza, but also to those that are definitely not exactly supporting what would be democracy, let alone American values across the world, and certainly many other terrorist groups, such as in Afghanistan. So, yes, I think house cleaning definitely, with a chance that people will clean up their own act, if not shut down, as Elon Musk purports to want to do.
Yeah, so there's been a study by the Middle East Forum that estimates hundreds of millions of dollars has been funded to
Yes.
terrorist organizations. But the other complaint that people have had is that a lot of this money has gone on DEI programs. Can you talk a bit about how US aid has gone to fund, diversity programs in Serbia and India and so on?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I would say, the best report came from Caroline Levitt, the press secretary. She actually read off a list of a lot of these projects that were transgender operas, I believe, even in Ireland and in Syria, and DEI initiatives. So basically dictating to other countries not what were considered to be traditional American values, but certainly left-leaning, somewhat radical actual values. And I think if you were to turn this around to any Democrat that opposes this and say, well, what if they were right-leaning, far right-wing values? They're not. We're talking about mainstream American values of the opportunity to work, the opportunity to have an education for all people. But this was set up in 1998 and was supposed to help those that were underprivileged around the world. And Stephen, it's not helping the underprivileged. It's actually delivering propaganda and pushing a far left-wing agenda.
Why do you think the Democrats have become so upset about this? We've seen them protesting outside of the USAID offices in Washington, D.C. A lot of people are sort of guessing or suggesting that many of these organizations that USAID funds actually support, some of these Democrat policy positions. So do you think that's part of the reason they're so upset about the cutting of the funding here?
Well, I can't speak ever for other people. Anybody who pretends they can isn't being quite honest. No one can say what other people are thinking unless they actually say it themselves. But I would say from the feedback and from the kind of banners they're holding and the sort of rhetoric, I think it's that they object to the cutting of funding sort of across the board. Why? Why would you object to American taxpayer dollars being spent in other countries for something that either you do or don't believe in? So first of all, it's a waste of money. There's many other things. I think one of the issues here for those of us that do think that this money should be cut is that you look at the people of Florida and North Carolina after actual tragedies where their actual homes have been destroyed and they've been offered a total of $750 versus the millions spent on this sort of agenda. The other thing I would say is if you look at some of the countries this is going to, that is what a lot of the objections are about. The people that object to this funding, it's the countries, Stephen. These aren't our friends. These aren't our allies. And where they are an ally, like Ireland, it's going on a radical agenda that isn't a mainstream agenda. So I think that's what people that support this are against. The people that, as you say, and you asked the question about protesting, they also could be people that are losing their jobs. You mentioned the 40 billion. In that 40 billion, there are 10,000 people that are employed. Perhaps these are people that are going to lose their jobs. And that's another reason that they're protesting. That's only speculation on my part, but that is what I would say. And obviously, this is the Democrats finding something to tangibly complain about because they don't like the agenda of government efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some examples here. We can, $2 million for Moroccan poetry classes, $2 million promoting tourism in Lebanon, $20 million for a Sesame Street show in Iraq, 1.5 million for DEI in Serbia, $70,000 you mentioned for a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. So it does seem just bizarre that US taxpayer money was spent on this. Why
Yes.
do you think they've got away with this for so long? As you say, this has been decades in the running. Why have they been able to spend or waste, frankly, so much money on these projects?
Well, a couple of reasons, Stephen, that are definite, and that is lack of government oversight, lack of scrutiny, and also they're blocking any attempts, because I do know that there have been certainly congressmen and women who have tried to track down these funds, and they say that their staff members have been not only thwarted, but threatened, which is actually a ghastly thing to think about. So that's been a definite. I've seen congressmen and senators interviewed saying exactly that their staff members were threatened, not just their efforts thwarted, but they said roadblocks were set up all along the way. The other thing in life, I really am a great believer in follow the money. If you look at not only where this money was spent, look at who is benefiting, look at who a lot of these subcontractors are. That's where you'll find a lot of the criminality. So there were people in their own best interests were obviously trying to cover this up. So you have not only roadblocks thrown up by USAID, but those subcontractors taking all that money, they also want to cover their tracks. So that's why you're seeing this covered up for many, many years. Too many people, to use that crass expression, sucking off the teat of the government's, taxpayer funded cash flow.
Elon Musk has headed up this Department of Government Efficiency. He's not just looking at USAID, but he's looking across the government for finding waste and inefficiency and so on. Do you support that agenda overall? Do you think it's been a long time coming that there's been just far too much waste, and you're quite excited about what Elon and what Trump are doing here?
Well, yes. And actually, Stephen, there have been attempts over the years to give credit. It was the Simpson-Bowles investigation and act where they actually did investigate a lot of agencies and found fraud, waste and abuse many years ago. The issue, again, was the same thing. There were too many contractors, too many subcontractors, and too many people involved on the big take that they couldn't really get much enacted on many savings. But there have been attempts over the years. This has been recognized for many years. And I know that the last time that obviously the federal budget was balanced, there was a lot of cutting of fraud, waste and abuse. And to give Democrats credit, Bill Clinton, who nowadays probably would be considered a conservative, one of the many things that he did was he actually cut and renovated, revolutionized and updated the Social Security system in terms of the unemployment, and that people had to go back to work, had to be in the midst of a job search to get their unemployment. So Bill Clinton did a lot. Bill Clinton recognized this. So this isn't just a Republican issue. This has been a pervasive issue. And back to the years of Kennedy. Kennedy initiated a lot of this also. So there have been Democrats that have done this, those that are centrists that have done this, and anybody who has cared about where the taxpayer dollars have gone has tried to do this over the years. And now to answer your question, why hasn't this actually been enacted or taken place? In my lifetime, I would say, Stephen, and many other people would say the same thing, I have never seen a government act so fast, any politicians do exactly what they said they were going to do so quickly, so rapidly. And I think the biggest difference here, Stephen, is you've got business people acting the way the business world does. If you say you're going to do something in business, you meet. If you say you're going to do something in business, you do. Government, for some reason, has acted on a completely different principle, which is you don't have to meet and you don't have to do. I have always said, and I'll say it again, that I believe there should be an amendment to the Constitution that to hold office, you have to have made payroll. Why? If you're a business person, you know how business works, and the business of America should be business. Now, does it mean that we shouldn't have people that know about the Constitution and that have a legal background at some juncture? Okay, that's nice to have, but you can always bring in lawyers. You can always bring in constitutional experts. Let's have the business of America be business. And I think you'll see from what Donald Trump's trying to do that he not only cares about this country and wants to make it great again with the golden age, he will make us profitable again. And I bet you in his administration, he will either come close to or get perhaps eliminate the national debt.
Well, that's the key issue, isn't it? It's the deficit in particular.
Yes.
And, obviously the national debt is huge, but I think the deficit is definitely what they're focusing on. Is that something that you're concerned about in terms of the future of the American economy? Do you think the deficit is too large? And can you just talk about the overall economic impact of that?
Yes, Stephen, the absolute, the biggest impact is the amount of interest on the debt, because we have more interest being paid on the debt, the trillions of debt, than we do actual expenditure. So what are we getting for it? Tell me what you get for interest. You really don't get much. So, in fact, nothing, less than nothing. You're wasting and throwing away money. So it's not just the debt, it's the interest on the debt. Those are the two big issues. To bring it down, when President Trump just signed creating a national wealth fund, this has been created by many other countries. Norway actually has one of the largest, but Norway, Saudi Arabia, I believe there are 63 other countries at least, or maybe more, that have these national wealth funds. Usually they actually are based upon having a natural resource where they have excess revenue and they invest it for future generations. We don't have excess revenue, but to bring down the debt, if we were to invest in companies, as President Trump has purportedly wanted to do and says he might do, which is invest in a company like TikTok, if we could, as a government, the US government, be making money, that money could then go to paying down the debt. So to answer your question in a nutshell, deficits are bad. Interest on the deficit is even worse. Getting it down could be achieved by a national wealth fund, but we have to bring that deficit down to have a future as a nation.
All right. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.